that was Mantronic from Inside the Electric Circus. Then we heard The Last Command, Widowmaker, Ball Crusher, and of course started with Wild Child from Last Command. So, Mantronic, the first tune from Inside the Electric Circus that we ended with there, kind of interesting doomy opening.
Hmm.
Kind of something new. We haven't heard that aspect, although it will show up on later records, but kind of leads to a sort of Van Halen meets AC/DC kind of killer fucking Randy Piper riff, which is pretty cool. And kind of silly Terminator sci-fi kind of lyrics or whatever, but whatever.
I mean, yeah, it's
Um,
like another, I guess I gotta stop using this term, but a spiritual successor to Metal Gods. How
it's
like
got that. Yeah.
dun,
Yep.
dun, dun, that mechanical drumming to it that doesn't really change much, but little Dokken, slow interlude bit, and that like fucking kick down the door
The kind of
solo.
interesting acoustic dynamics are cool. That's
Yeah.
like stuff that Blackie's going to use that way more effectively on Headless Children and especially Crimson Idol. I think he
Hmm.
kind of masters it on that record. So it's like, even though like Inside the Electric Circus is my least of their, early phase records, you can hear he's ruminating on some ideas and starting to bring some things in that will work for later stuff. I cut you off. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. What were you say?
Oh, I
Oh,
was just
I thought
saying
I cut you
I was
off.
just talking about the solo, I think.
Oh, I. It's pretty raw.
Yeah.
It's like
It's just like a
kind
kick
of a
down the door
return of.
solo.
Yeah, you can tell like Blackie kind of is pissed about the production and how clean Last Command is. I think he wanted to make a statement, even if the songs are not the best W.A.S.P songs. There's still like a little bit of edge to like where they're starting to push themselves, I would say.
Yeah, and coming back to the cliches of hard rock, the
Mhm.
circus.
That's it. I
The
mean,
Psycho Circus, man. Welcome to the show where the circus is crazy.
and he's the ringleader.
He's the
He's
ringleader of the
kind of
crazies.
is
Yeah.
right in it. So here's what he had to say in the inner liner notes. He said it was the summer of '86. After a record and a tour, another record and another tour, we were reaching breaking point. Randy Piper had been replaced by Johnny Rod. We had met Johnny when King Cobra was opening for us on the Last Command tour. We were tired, paranoid, pissed off, and angry. Now for different reasons. Disillusioned by the music business in general, and flat fucking famous. Thanks to our infamous shows in the PMRC, WASP had become a household word. It was about this time that the PMRC's publicity about us was completely out of control, and its effects were bizarre to say the least. They had a lot of people convinced I was the devil himself and that the world would be better off without me. During the tour for this album, the only place in America where we did not get a bomb scare was the very last show in Long Beach, California. I had received death threats by the hundreds. I had already been shot at 3 times, and the FBI had been called in twice to investigate other problems. And it was at this point they recommended that I did not live alone, which is what I had done to that point. I mean, that's pretty wild. Like
Yeah,
the
thanks for trying to protect the
notorieties.
children but kill the artists.
Exactly. I mean, that's how we deal with things with blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
Um, on top of all of that, our record company at the time, Capitol, seemed to care about only one thing, which was, quote, another record and another tour. This record was written, rehearsed, and recorded and mixed in 9 weeks. With the pace we had been on for the previous 3 years of recording, touring, videos, photo sessions, and interviews, there was just about no time to write new material. And the strain was not only wearing on me, I was out of my head and angry about it. I know it sounds like I'm complaining about the very success we wanted in the first place, but my concerns about the time to write quality music was what my aggravation was all about. I don't give a shit about how tired I get. Just as long as I can create the best music I can, then the end result is all worth it. But when your record company has you convinced that the quote, the world is going to come to an end if you don't get that record done and get back on tour immediately, you think, well, they've been in business a long time, so they must be right. But you know what? If you keep going like that, the only thing that's going to be over is your career. That was a very regrettable lesson I had to learn the hard way. On the bright side, though, it was on this tour, in the middle of all this aggravation and madness, that I conceived the beginnings of an idea that I would work on the next 5 years. That idea was the Crimson Idol. It's funny when you look back how clear things become. They say hindsight is 2020. Fucking A right. It was in a bar in LA International Airport. Myself, our manager Rod Smallwood, and the band were getting drunk as monkeys, a 7 hour delay on our way to Japan.
Oh,
That I came,
geez.
yeah, that I came up with the idea inside the Electric Circus. What an unbelievable Freudian slip. That was because looking back, that's exactly what we had become, a fucking insane traveling circus. Um, you know, this is produced by Lawless, himself after kind of his displeasure at the Spencer Proffer production on Last Command.
Hmm.
Um, it's my least favorite of the five, but I do like some tunes. And I think, like I said, I think songs like the title track kind of give a nod to where Blackie's storytelling interests lie beyond kind of the frivolous and the Bacchanal stuff that you heard on the first couple of records.
Yeah.
So I think it's a cue. It's the linchpin. You're not going to get to Headless Children and Crimson Idol without them trying to like format an idea like you get with Inside the Electric Circus.
Hmm.
So
But we get bangers like 9-5 Nasty.
9-5 Ness, and I like Restless Gypsy. It's
I like
anthemic.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's I yeah. I mean, it kind of still works a little bit. It's not my favorite record, and it's not one I'd probably listen to start to finish. But there's select songs that I think are pretty fun.
Well, like
Um,
9-5 Nasty seems like almost like them backpedaling a little bit to, or almost, excuse me, almost to kind of like placate to what the scene was happening. Because like just like the chorus sounds like something that would have been on MTV by, insert band here of some kind of like hair metal band.
I mean, it's funny you say that because I wrote next to 9-5 Nasty, which we're going to hear in this next set. I said, it's the final call for these sexually perverted, horny anthems. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it
kind of going
is.
back. It's like the last dying breath of like the old Wasp is in 9-5 Nasty, you
Yeah,
know?
because look at the, I guess Sweet Cheetah might have something there, but on side two, there's an Easy Living cover, the Uriah Heep cover.
Yep.
I'm Alive, Mantronic, King of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Rock and Rolls On.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the sex stuff is rapidly
And
dropping.
disappearing. Yep. Exactly. So before we get into the songs real quick, because I like the poetry of this guy, Dom Lawson, of course, we've heard from both his records. Here's what he had to say about this, and there is one thing that he says in here that I distinctly disagree with, but that's okay.
Tingling
But
balls or
you'll see. Not
okay.
Tingling Balls. By the time W.A.S.P released their third studio album in the autumn of '86, the band's none more decadent drive towards world domination was surging forward at full power. Traveling the globe and behaving the most debauched and quintessentially rock and roll manner imaginable, Blackie, Chris, Johnny Rod, and Steve Riley were living out their most preposterous, indulgent, and reckless fantasies, making their contemporaries, with one or two notable exceptions, look timid and tame by comparison. As a result of their demented cartoon lifestyle, the world of W.A.S.P had turned into an insane and unreal traveling circus, and thus the title for the band's third full length was born. Still tussling on a daily basis with their censorious right wing enemies in the US, W.A.S.P had lost none of their fire, determination, and anger by the time they put Inside the Electric Circus together. As strong a bunch of songs as they have ever recorded. That's maybe the part I see. Yeah. The
he's
album
being hyperbolic because he's
he,
doing all these liner
he's doing
notes.
liner notes. I
Yeah,
get it.
this
Yeah,
is
you're never going to talk
propaganda.
down a record. Yeah. Um, the album proved to be the band's biggest seller to date and firmly established them as a major attraction on the global arena circuit. Unfortunately, due to the insanity that surrounded the band and notoriety they had gained in the preceding few years, W.A.S.P were at a breaking point. Lawless had received death threats, been shot at several times, and been advised by the FBI not to live alone. That's what you get, apparently, for being a real rock and roll band at a time when sanitized pop and radio-friendly rock were the norm. But fuck it. This is another great W.A.S.P record, and all the turbulence that plagued the band clearly added to the vicious raging power of tracks like 9-5 Nasty and Shoot from the Hip. This time round, however, the band were displaying a more mature and thoughtful side to their otherwise unabashed strain of sonic excess. Covers of Humble Pie's I Don't Need No Doctor and Uriah Heep's Easy Living proved that there was more to W.A.S.P than the classic '80s LA metal sound. Elsewhere, the monumental Restless Gypsy and the anthemic The Rock Rolls On, with its war cry of The Rock Rolls Forever On, took the band's sound to a new level of accessibility without sacrificing one iota of attitude or aggression.
Mm.
History will. What's that?
I was just responding to him as what he just said as, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
they
exactly.
they sacrificed a little bit of a little
I
iota.
think I think the other thing too is the album sales thing, because Chris even asked them, and I'm not going to read that part of the interview, but Chris asked them about like how does it feel that the debut finally got gold certified, and Blackie was like, "Look, dude, we were gold a long time ago, but like all the paperwork, like in the way that that shit was kept track, like trust us." And I kind of believe Blackie.
Oh,
This was
I
such a
totally
big
believe that.
record
Yeah,
that there's no way this album didn't go platinum or gold, certainly,
yeah,
the debut, so
yeah.
I doubt that this actually did sell the most, but maybe on like the way it was tracked, it did. So, anyways, um, in his last paragraph, he says, "History will no doubt recall W.A.S.P.'s self-titled debut as the definitive album of their career." Oh, here's the thing I disagree with, Mark. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
But inside the Electric Circus comes a close second.
Ooh,
Nope. That's okay though. He's just doing his job. He's getting paid to write liner notes.
it's true.
Some of these songs, along with a load of older classics, would turn up on Live in the Raw album that emerged a year later, a thrilling document of the band's shows at San Diego's California Theater and Los Angeles' Long Beach Arena in '87. The strength of W.A.S.P. as a live band was never in doubt, but 3 albums in, the quartet were a reliably awesome live spectacle, even if Chris Holmes occasionally looked like a man in dire need of a lie down and a cup of cocoa. The next few years would see W.A.S.P. grow into an altogether more challenging and adventurous band, making Inside the Electric Circus the creative pinnacle of their early years.
Well, what do you consider? There's a lot of things
Yeah,
there. What do you consider the early years?
I know. I
I'd
don't
say
know.
it's the breaking point until they
Yeah,
did something that's completely reinvent themselves, like Sabbath did with Dio.
that's it. Yep, I
You know,
agree.
that's the next
Yep,
record.
yep. So what we're gonna hear is the kind of intro, the big welcome in the title track, which are kind of the album openers. It's got more bite, I will say that.
Hmm.
Blackie's got a sharper production. It's a little bit more tense, some of the songs. Um, but this kind of circus sideshow lifestyle and the focus on the band is coming to an end, and shit needed to get more serious. And I think this song kind of is kind of starting to tell that story.
It's got a little bit
And
of the Eye of the Tiger into Sabbath for that
mm,
opening riff.
yeah, no, it's a good point. Yep, that's a little Survivor meets Sabbath. Yep,
Yeah.
that's good. And in a way, like this is the cue that Blackie's about to become a different artist and a storyteller, and he's almost there. He's kind of like nudging closer to that. Um, and then we get 9-5 Nasty, and I just said, in addition to the lyrics, I said you can start to hear the vital influence in the chorus that he'd have on Blind Guardian. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
to me it's in 9-5 Nasty that you start to see like the horse. He's a little more hoarse on this record, the way he's
Hmm.
singing, and it's got the Hansi Kirsch kind of vibes to it. And so if you're just checking out W.A.S.P. As like a new person to discovering Requiem Metal podcast, and you're like, who the fuck is Blind Guardian are kind of a pretty renowned German power speed metal band that are, even if you don't like power metal, most people like Blind Guardian, and a lot of it has to do with Hansi and how good his vocals are, and just really the
And
whole band.
I think, yeah, the two guitar players are pretty
Yeah,
fucking incredible too.
everything, drummer, everything works.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Hansi has a very much a melodic, hoarse quality to his voice. And when I interviewed Hansi back in the Eclipse days, he said that Blackie Lawless was maybe his main, probably him and Udo were two of his big, vocal
With a
influences.
little bit
And
of Freddie Mercury.
for sure, he definitely has that Freddie Mercury style as well. Yep,
I mean,
yep.
I think he would love to sing like Freddie Mercury, but he knows his limitations.
Sure. He can do it a couple times. Like he does it in the Elder on Nightfall. There's a few
Hmm.
moments where he'll hit like a Freddie Mercury thing, but I don't think he could do it for like a whole album or even like multiple songs.
Yeah.
But like he's hoarse here, and it really kind of pulls off like kind of a sleazy mastery to what Blackie's kind of doing. And I just said like the whole album sounds angrier. And Lawless is moving over to guitar to replace Piper, and
Yeah.
this is
Rhythm.
of course, yep. And Johnny Rod kind of comes in.
For
Um,
such a terrible name, I think Johnny Rod's doing a great job with bass on this record.
it's good, yeah. He's fine. He's
He's
not
up in the
Blackie.
mix a little more.
Yeah, although he'll get out of the mix on the live record, which is unfortunate. You don't
Yeah.
hear him much on Live in the Raw, but that just could have been the way it was recorded. Um, Now we get Restless Gypsy, the last tune we'll hear from Inside the Electric Circus. And I just said that it's a really cool Maiden Priest kind of main riff to it. It's got kind of that vibe to it.
It reminds me a lot of like, post 2000 Priest to
I
me.
could see that. Yeah.
Like a
There's even
real,
like
like a mature, more refined. gallop and ballad and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Even like later day, like 90s, 2000s Maiden, perhaps too,
Yeah.
a little with that. It's kind of a classic road song that every band writes, being out on the road, trying to find that, the woman, that kind of like wandering spirit kind of thing to it. But,
Yeah.
you know, and at this point, the band were probably feeling like kind of restless gypsies, like just kind of you're just doing this like cycle of tour, record kind of thing.
Yeah, and this
This is
song totally reminds me. This could have been something that was on the Transformers the movie soundtrack.
which is interesting because Lion will actually have something to do with Crimson Idol. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it's probably my favorite tune on the album for me. It's pretty
Yeah.
anthemic. Really fantastic home solo. Probably his best at this point. I would say for me in terms of like the mechanics, the heartfelt, the emotive quality. It's really what he's going to continue to do on Headless and where he peaks out. But I don't know. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Let me get to one tune we want to sort of share from Live in the Raw. And Live in the Raw is fine. It's not like the greatest live record, and there's definitely critics of it. I think Holmes is pretty fantastic on it. It might be
Hmm.
him at his peak, really, in a lot of ways. But the reason why I wanted to play one tune is you can only hear this tune harder, faster on Live in the Raw. And of course, it opens with this very infamous Blackie kind of intro where he just goes off on the PMRC. And it's pretty iconic. And you can tell where his headspace was. He was definitely at his wits end with a lot of the stress that was going on in his life, and he's just
Yeah.
fucking letting it rip here. And musically it's harder, it's heading kind of more towards the next album, I'd say. Like it's got some of the harder edge that Headless Children will have. um
But also pretty like in your face lyrics. The
yeah,
suck me, eat me raw.
yeah. Lyrically it's just whatever, but like musically it's kind of pretty complex. It's got some
Yeah.
cool stuff kind of happening. Here's what Dom said about the live record. He says one of the best ways to discern whether a band are true rock and roll greats or more dodgy chancers is to wait for the all-important live album. Whether it's AC/DC seminal If You Want Blood, You've Got It, Priest suspiciously polished Unleashed in the East, or Maiden's awesome Live After Death set. Great live albums are one of the fundamental requirements of any band's bid for legendary status. And appropriately, W.A.S.P were teetering on the cusp of greatness back in '87 when this astonishing blast of untamed sonic mayhem hit the shops. After 3 studio albums that tore the U.S. metal scene a bloody and ragged new arsehole, Blackie Lawless and his mentally unbalanced compadres embarked on a mammoth tour that would see them lay waste to a great number of America's arenas. Culled from 3 performances in Long Beach, San Diego, and San Bernardino, Live in the Raw represents a celebration of W.A.S.P's indubitable prowess as ass-kicking rock and roll crew. The notable absence of the notorious Animal Fuck Like a Beast aside, this is something of a greatest hit so far and more effort with everything from the anthemic I Want to Be Somebody and the sleaze-tastic Blind in Texas through to 2 songs that have never been released elsewhere, The Manimal and Harder Faster, rendered in living, breathing oral technicolor.
I think they
With
should
the
have done a
roar,
single with Mantronic and the Manimal.
Manimal and Mantronic, yeah. Although I will say the Manimal is it's not very good. You
No.
can tell why it's never been on an album. Whereas
Yeah.
Harder Faster actually musically has some pretty cool shit going on.
I think so.
With the roar of the grease paint and the stench of the crowd, this is the classic W.A.S.P lineup featuring psychotic axe wielder Chris Holmes, bassist Johnny Rod, and drummer Steve Riley at their snotty and belligerent best. The album also includes 1 studio track, an irresistibly catchy sing-along song called "Scream Until You Like It," that was the main theme song on the soundtrack to the fantastic film, Mark, Ghoulies 2.
Ghoulies 2,
Uh,
not the first one, but Ghoulies
yes,
2.
which Dom describes as a rather piss poor and forgettable teen horror flick that also emerged in '87.
That's
The song
perfect.
itself,
That's perfect review
yeah,
right there.
piss poor. Yep. Song itself is not exactly one of W.A.S.P's finest, but it did secure the band a chart hit in the UK and helped to raise their profile around the globe. Um, yeah, and that's pretty much it. He just kind of is kind of talking about the live record. So we're gonna hear Harder Faster from Live in the Raw as well, and then we're gonna hear our first tune from Headless Children called the Neutron Bomber, and we'll talk more about that when we come back. So we've got the big welcome, the intro to Inside the Electric Circus. Then we've got 9-5 Nasty, Restless Gypsy, all from the record Inside the Circuit, Electric Circus. And then we've got Harder Faster from Live in the Raw in 87. And then from 1989's Headless Children, we've got the Neutron Bomber.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and wild ones of all ages, step right up. I welcome you to come on in, inside the Electric Circus. The music is your passport, your magic key to all the madness that awaits you. Feel the thunder and the frenzy, and see all the unusual animals. And the animals, well, they're something else. I've been reading an awful lot in the newspapers and the magazines about me and my boys here. And I was reading one article in particular about an organization, you might have heard of it before, they're called the PMRC. Well, I read where they said that they think that we are sexual perverts. Now, this is coming from an organization called the Washington Wives. And I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like some sort of goddamn Jackie Collins Hollywood fucking novel, if you ask me. Well, this is for that whole bunch, because they can suck me, eat me raw. This is Harder, Faster!
That was the Neutron Bomber from the Headless Children from 1989. Then we had the live version of Harder Faster from Live in the Raw. And then Restless Gypsy, 9-5 Nasty, Inside the Electric Circus, and The Big Welcome from 1986's Inside the Electric Circus. So, Neutron Bomber. Right from fucking Frankie Banali's kind of ominous drum intro. And Frankie Banali, for those of you that don't know, is from Quiet Riot. That's where he kind of became famous. And then colored by that fucking, the Uriah Heep keyboardist, Ken Hensley's, sorry, kind of deep purple, sort of warm glow.
Well, the fact that he's on this record is like kind of huge.
It's pretty wild.
Like, I love the addition of keyboards on this record.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is W.A.S.P phase 2 right here. Boom, we're off to the races. Great song, fucking awesome topical stuff. It's a song about Ronald Reagan. Nuclear war, the neutron bomb. Like all of that sort of stuff. But the chorus is irresistible.
Yeah.
The drums are incessant, and the subject matter is dark, man. And that's really where Headless Children's going to sort of go. Yeah, it's a fun song, and I thought kind of a good introduction to like all the major things that are about to change about W.A.S.P, from the lineup changes with Frankie coming in. Chris is fucking spot on. He's like kind of locked in with this whole record in terms of his solo work and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. This is kind of your favorite record from them. So I guess curiously, what grabs you the most about this record in particular?
It reminds me of the best possible way of I guess, well, Sabbath was like a Mark II, but like a established band reinventing themselves and like kind of stretching out quite a bit, but it all works really well. I don't know how well it worked in 1989. Because a lot of this is it sounds pretty old, pretty throwback for, a lot of this Deep Purple, Uriah Heep kind of stuff. I don't know how much that hit in 89, but for me in 2024, I think this shit's incredible. It reminds me of, Martin era Sabbath as well. Just like with how, I don't think there's a bad era of Sabbath. There's different levels of what I think is, if I had to do a list, but for every different singer they had, every different lineup they had, even when it was just, Iommi with a different crew, he always had something different to say. And this thing about this record too is that I think out of almost anybody I've ever heard, I think that somehow Blackie Lawless figures out how to do that Iommi simple, dead simple riff. Where he, like, no matter what he's playing, Iommi has great riffs. And I feel like this is just, he's kind of like, kind of pulling in that influence or something. Because he's always talked about Sabbath as an influence, but you don't necessarily hear it too much. Here you hear it a lot, I think.
Yeah. No, I think you're hitting it right on. Sabbath is one of his big songwriting people, like along with the Who and the Beatles and stuff, but we just haven't heard a lot of it creep in. But I think it's the dark apocalyptic qualities of Headless Children are hitting on some of those. Sabbath wrote, like, War Pigs is a great apocalyptic song, about the effects of nuclear war and things like that, and Vietnam.
Warmongers, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's in him because he's a byproduct of the 70s and that sort of early phase 1 of metal, Deep Purple, like, keyboard stuff that Hensley's doing on this record. It's all kind of coming out. So it's like almost all the eras of W.A.S.P are kind of happening in this song, or all his influences are kind of starting to come together in a cool way.
Yeah. Even with the covers on this record.
Yeah.
With the cover.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll definitely talk about The Real Me, but this is from, it's actually strange, Iron Fist magazine, which is this pretty great kind of British magazine that kind of covers the gauntlet of all of our interests, I would say. And
their whole magazine is kind of based on almost like the what Albert's doing with Indecibel with the Hall of Fames, is that they'll do like an entire issue just on, I've got one on Bathory and Priest, and like they really do deep dives, which is, it's a cool way to go with a kind of a format that's not necessarily like what it used to be.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it doesn't come out a lot, but it's worth tracking down if you can get some issues. This one has Blackie on the cover called "W.A.S.P. The Beast is Back," but it also has Root and Acid and Overkill and Saxon and My Dying Bride and Graveyard and just tons of weird. It's a very eclectic and very cool. But Popoff actually wrote this article and interviewed Blackie for it, so we can't escape Popoff. He's everywhere.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of a little setup to this record a little bit, and Blackie kind of offering some insight. And Popoff says, but one core characteristic from the past that reaches back to the classic first and second albums Wasp unleashed in the mid 80s is this idea of shocking people after seducing them, not killing them with kindness, but killing them after the kindness. And Blackie says, see, this is where we trick people. We did this on purpose. We were playing rock that was more mainstream. We tricked people with the way we looked, and that wasn't really designed to try and pull the wool over anybody's eyes. It's just when I say we tricked them, it's just a byproduct of where we were coming from. I guess in that the look became so dominant. We learned years later that when it comes to sight and sound, that vision is always the dominant sense. People end up listening with their eyes instead of their ears, whether they think they are or not. So again, because of that really aggressive attitude where we were coming from, I think that's where these other bands, whether it's black metal bands or whatever they may be, that's probably where they get their W.A.S.P influence from, because it certainly wasn't the music. And then he says, Popoff says, so as a package, then, what was the message Headbangers were drawing from the Shock Trooper Wasp of 1985? He says, we didn't know, and we really didn't. I know that sounds incredibly naive and or like I'm trying to dodge the question, but I'll give you an example. When all that PMRC stuff was going on, and we were maybe a year and a half into it, we were on tour in America, and you couldn't go anywhere. Any local place we were going to was on the news. And after a while, two things happened. It became part of our everyday lives, so you got wrapped up in it. But at the same time, it started to create questions. I remember one day, Chris Holmes and I were at a hotel somewhere watching something on TV, and they were going on and on about it. And he looks at me and goes, "What's the big deal all about?" And I looked at him and said, "I have no idea. We didn't." But when we were getting ready to make Headless, I went into a club one night and the video for Live at the Lyceum was on TV. And I sat down. I hadn't probably seen that thing since we did it. I looked up at the screen, and it was the first time I think I ever saw us the way people were seeing us, because my head had moved on. I was not in that same space anymore. I'm thinking in terms of pure music now. I looked up at the video, and as I was watching it for the first time in my life, I could understand why that band scared people. We could never see it before, and the reason we couldn't see it was the reason it scared them. We were not making stuff up and not putting on airs. We were just being ourselves. And that being genuine bled through. And it looked at it and I thought, whoa, look at this. No wonder we scared people. And so, as alluded to, having established themselves as more evil and bloodied up than Motley Crue, Blackie found redemption, once more, artistic redemption, creating a thoughtful W.A.S.P classic, The Headless Children, in 1989. Quote, the label certainly, when we got ready to make Headless, they heard the demos and they said, this is not the record you should make, recalls Blackie. They wanted Last Command Part 3, and I had moved on from that spot, and I couldn't have made, a second, what page? I could have made that record again if I wanted to, which I didn't, but my head wasn't even there. And they're telling me, oh, this is not the record you should make. This is not going to work. This is not where the market is at right now. And well, the rest of the story. And they all shut up after that. And the same thing happened again on the next record. They heard the concept of the Crimson Idol and they said, oh, that's not the record you should make. Concept records are dead. And it's like, if I don't make both of these records, you and I aren't having this conversation right now. So kind of interesting insight into where his headspace and the push pull of, them wanting him to make yet another kind of remake of Last Command,
Yeah, and I don't know where this falls as far as Billboard or any of that stuff.
He did okay,
Yeah, but like 89 is it's kind of a weird year, and for any kind of band like this that's so entrenched in a certain kind of aesthetic, to be able to change and still sound vital and interesting is awesome. Also, there's another Sabbath connection. I'm not sure if you knew, but because Iommi was hooked up with Lita Ford, and also Chris Holmes actually married her in the 90s.
Yeah, I did know. I forgot Chris Holmes got married to her.
Yeah.
So the hell's going on? Sorry. something on my computer popping up. Um, Will return, I think, for the last time because I don't think he does anything for Crimson Idol. To Dom Lawson, wrote the inside cover of Headless Children here, and he says, as the 1980s drew to a close, it was clearly time for rock and roll to take a serious look at itself. The advent of the thrash metal boom and the emergence of fledgling grunge scene had left the doyens of the LA glam metal movement looking either decidedly antiquated or just plain stupid. Of all those chart bothering spandex clad buffoons, only W.A.S.P survived the decade with their dignity and popularity firmly intact. And you hold the principal reason for this in your hands. The Headless Children marks the moment that Blackie Lawless grew up and began to blossom into the sophisticated songwriter and creative force that we know today. Having already proved himself to be the master of the 3 minute amphetamine laced rock and metal power surge with such classics as Animal and Inside the Electric Circus, New York's tallest and scariest export was aiming somewhat higher when he penned the 9 songs that, along with a fiery cover of The Who's Stop Fucking Doing That. Sorry, something's like a Google alert is popping up on my computer, and
Do you
it's
want to update your Windows right now, Jason?
actually a Google alert telling me that I'm going to a concert tonight, Tomb Mold and Horrendous. So not that I
Oh,
didn't know
thanks,
that. So
Google.
thanks, Google. Yeah. Along with a fiery cover of The Who's The Real Me, comprise this most concise and cohesive of W.A.S.P albums. The end result of Blackie's efforts would become the defining moment in the band's recorded history and remains a jewel in what has since become a remarkably consistent back catalog. The arrival of this new, improved, less demented W.A.S.P was heralded by the album's first single, the furious swagger of Mean Man, a self-evident paean to guitarist Chris Holmes, a man for whom the excesses of the LA glam scene had been a constant source of both pain and pleasure. The song encapsulated the last dying gasp of the W.A.S.P of old. Storms are coming, and it's going to be me, roars Blackie. Here comes trouble with a capital T. Anyone who has witnessed Holmes' performance in Penelope Spheeris's cult rockumentary, The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years, will appreciate the accuracy of these wise words. Elsewhere, the Headless Children offers grandiose epics that pulsate with renewed creative fervor. The Heretic, and the monumental title track, heart-piercing balladry like "Forever Free," and hard-ass rock and roll with previously unheard level of depth and poignancy like "Thunderhead" and "Rebel" in the FDC. F.D.G. Sorry. There is still humor, humanity, and a dash of the band's traditional approach to making a racket, but there's no denying that 1989 saw W.A.S.P outgrow their ludicrous, dick-waving roots and evolve into something 10 times more lethal. Bolstered by the assistance of session drummer Frankie Benali, a member of fellow glam scenesters Quiet Riot, and with the super talented Ken Hensley, an original member of prog rock legends Uriah Heep, whose
Founding member.
classic, what's that? Yeah, founding member.
Yeah.
Adding a hefty dose of keyboard wizardry, the viscous glory of the band's trademark sound was duly expanded into an ever bigger, better, and more bombastic sonic assault. With its first foray into a more ambitious musical world receiving widespread plaudits and applause, Blackie Lawless must have known that he had hit the nail squarely on the head. As a result, his next project would prove to be even more daring. Dot, dot, dot.
Oh,
Dot, dot, dot. Yeah. Um,
but the real
so
me is basically like it's like one of the early "I'm a freak, check it out" songs. So it makes a lot of sense to be on this record.
and Quadrophenia too is such a. I mean, I prefer it to Tommy. I think it's a better story and it's a better album altogether. And it it's this depressive lost child, youth gone wild themes that the opening song, the Lost Child Heretic, kind of
Hmm.
hits on too. So, for it's one thing. It's kind of like Typo Negative seem to have a penchant for like knowing how to like almost fit thematically sometimes their covers into the actual flow of the record without destroying the flow.
Well,
And
also the legacy of that original cover almost like amplifies what they're trying to say throughout that album too.
sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, so they thematically weave it in. It's not tacked on at the end. It's track number two. Like
Yeah.
they're like it's kind of part of this kind of idea of the lost child, the headless children, all of this stuff is kind of thematically together. And Pete Townsend actually loves this version. He actually told Blackie, like, it's the way I wished our version could have sounded, but you guys recorded it with the
That's good.
the fury of like what in my mind I wanted this song about, like a kid screaming out about like wanting to be included and wanting to be
Yeah.
seen as like a human being, so I think that's really cool. Famously, Quadrophenia, Mark, I'm not sure if you know this, is the album that saved Eddie Vedder's life. So
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
he was like super suicidal, and then he got Quadrophenia and he kind of realized he wasn't alone, and so that's
Wow.
cool.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Eddie.
I know. I like Eddie. I know you don't, but I think he's
I
so
think he's fine on
I just think the power of a record to save like lives is cool, and I think that, that
that's
that's
good.
that's pretty
Yeah.
neat,
I mean,
so and the real me speaks to that kind of like you're not alone. Like everyone feels suicidal, depressed, like when you're an adolescent, a teenager, that kind of thing. So
yeah, Eddie
um
did this when he's 47, but it's okay.
that's yes. Um so
Ornette
let's
Coleman
talk.
also had something to say about music, but
He did, yes, yeah.
music has the quality
um
to preserve life.
it does, yeah. um Prior to this record, this is going to be Holmes' last record until 1995.
Which I never listened to at all.
I
Kill,
mean, either
fuck, love, or whatever it is.
Kill, Fuck, Death, or I
Kill,
can't
fuck,
remember
yeah,
what it is.
yeah.
Um, but prior to this record came the aforementioned Decline of Western Civilization Part Two. And it was really, the if you've never seen this documentary, watch it. It's kind of a canary in the coal mine to the whole kind of decadent MTV kind of glam metal, hitting its apex, but also seeing the roots of its own destruction, in it. And
But also, it's come to light in recent years that how accurate is the portrayal. Some of this could be a little bit overdone,
mostly what
overblown.
I know that he only the first part of it was real vodka and the rest was just water. But
Yeah.
Chris Holmes did become an alcoholic, as Blackie will kind of talk about.
Oh
So
yeah, for
it's
sure.
like
But I
this
think this
blurred
was
line of,
it made it a little more over the top than it really was.
yeah. And I'm not sure how much Penelope knew what Chris was doing, or, that he was kind of doing like breaking kayfabe, or, whether it
Yeah,
was a shoot or whatever. I have no idea. I've read some stuff where she's like, I try not to make I try to like take myself out of my documentaries and just let the people do their own thing, like
I
kiss
think
pick
she had the
where they
right,
want to
the
go.
kind of the true, the like she was trying to figure out what the truth was.
Sure.
And I think these guys, as being performers, were blown. And actually, in some of the recent interviews with Chris Holmes that I was reading, was a lot of that was manufactured. He had a alcohol problem for sure, but a lot of that stuff he was like going over the top to make it look even more ludicrous than it really was.
And unfortunately, whether it's real or not real, it kind of was the final nail in the coffin of him and Blackie's relationship, because it brought so much negative attention and heat into the band. And as we just read about, Blackie's already at like breaking point with his PMRC shit, and like
Yeah.
I just think it was kind of the point of no return for these two. So the book Nothing But a Good Time has a chapter on Decline, but I just wanted to share the part where it kind of gets into the Chris Holm part a little bit, because I think it's interesting to hear how different people's perspectives on stuff. um, Alan Niven, I'll start in the middle of the chapter. He was the Guns N' Roses manager. He said, in an empty club during daylight hours, Penelope Spheris tried to persuade me to involve my bands in her decline. Here's what he calls it: decline of all aspects of sanity movie. And since neither appeared, I suppose something about Mrs. Spheris must have triggered my protective reluctance. And Penelope says, we had all the set ready to go, and Alan decided at the last minute he didn't want Guns N' Roses to do it. That's why I got Megadeth. So thank you, Alan. And Alan goes, oh, damn, you mean Slash could have played the Chris Holmes part? So uh, Penelope says, Chris Holmes. And she pauses. It's not my fault he was that drunk. I didn't want it to look like that either. I told the cameraman, we got to set this up again and shoot something we can use because the guy was just a total fuck up and we didn't get anything. So when we're going to reschedule, so when are we going to reschedule this? And they said, well, we don't have enough money to shoot this again. So I went into the editing room and tried to cut it together. And I was grimacing the whole time going, oh my God. And then it turns out to be the scene that everybody talks about in the film. JJ French from Twisted Sister says, I go to the Rainbow one night and Chris Holmes is there. He's at the table, drunk as shit. I walk over and someone says, JJ, it's Chris Holmes. He puts his hand out and he puts his hand out as he rolls off the table and falls face down onto the floor. I'm looking at this scene going, is this out of Spinal Tap? It was just too stupid. I said, I don't need to meet people this stupid. I like the guys from Rat a lot more. Penelope says, I saw Chris in a bar later on and he said, hey, you fucking bitch, you owe me $500. He yells it across the bar. And I'm like, dude, you were too drunk to remember. We paid you. Um, so Ricky Rocket.
I always love to yell that at people that I know.
You fucking bitch. Yeah. You should yell that in public places, you know. Ricky Rocket from Poison says, we had a lot of fun with that movie. And Penelope says, I thought Poison were hilarious. Cece's so fucking funny. And Ozzy's hilarious, too. I tried to do a movie with Ozzy called Shooting Stars in the mid-'80s before I did the metal years. And everybody that I went to for money for that film would say, he's not funny. I'd say, Ozzy's hilarious. Could you please just listen to me? Ozzy is hilarious. Nobody would listen to me, you know. Sharon says, Penelope said, okay, Ozzy, you make breakfast and I'll interview you. And that's what happened. That was it. And that's what you got. You know, that's Ozzy. Penelope says, well, if you've ever seen the first decline, you've got Darby Crash making breakfast. If you've seen the third decline, you've got Eyeball from the Resistance making breakfast. It's a common theme. Ozzy Osbourne says, I was fucked up when I did that. Penelope Spirit says, he put butter on the bacon. Jesus Christ. Sharon goes,
you could put, I was fucked up when I did that to anything that Ozzy's done the last 50 years.
I was so fucked up when I did that. Yeah. People always try and take something away from Ozzy, but there's nobody like him. Nobody. And when you see him, when he's at his purest like that, people are always like, no, that must be fake. No, that's really Ozzy. That's fucking Ozzy. Penelope Sphere says, I staged the orange juice thing, common knowledge, but that's it. Ozzy goes, Penelope, I got on with her very well. She's a nice lady, a bit crazy, but we're all a bit crazy at times. And then they say Rick Browd, I'm not sure who he is, but he says the movie debuted at the Cinerama Dome. It's that big round theater in Hollywood. The kid with 2-color hair, he hired a limo to come to the movie because he thought he was going to be a star. He was so sure he was going to be a star. The look on his face when he saw that movie and realized what a klutz he was. At least he had the limo to go crawl back into. Steve Rochelle, the singer of Tough, says, I remember a couple guys from Poison were there. I know Gene Simmons was there, and I'm pretty sure Dave Mustaine was there. And Tammy Down, who I think is in Faster Pussycat. Yeah. He says, I remember fucking Chris Holmes was there with his mom. It was fucking great. And the jokes were flying when Chris came on the screen because he's sitting there with his mom and shit. And they were right in front of us. And we were right in the middle of the whole fucking theater. Lizzie Borden says, when you see Chris in the pool, it was fun and games. We were all laughing and having fun. And no one was thinking about what this could end up being. But Chris is still alive. So it's all good. So there you go. And then let's see. I think there was more part I was going to say or read about. No, this part's cool. I'll just share this. This is something I had no idea about the impact of decline of Western civilization. Christina Applegate, actress. Originally, my character of Kelly Bundy on Married with Children was kind of like a tough little rebellious biker kind of chick. It kind of evolved or devolved, if you want to call it that, after I saw this girl in the documentary Decline of Western Civilization. And I went, oh my God, that's her. That's her. So we kind of changed her up to be sort of a product of the 80s, of this generation of girls that felt they needed to use their bodies to get further in the world. And the music was heavy metal. And there was a girl in the movie who had just won Miss Gazzari's, and she's sitting there, I believe, in a white mini dress, which I had never really seen anyone wear. And they asked her what she wanted to do after winning Miss Gazzari's. And she said, quote, I want to continue with my modeling and my actressing. And I went, that's the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And literally the next day I went to the wardrobe people and to everyone I said, we're changing this up. So there you go. That's a little bit of the backstory there. There's more in the chapter about it, but I thought the part on Chris Holmes, whether it's true or not, it created a lot of,
it's the most notorious part of that film. Yeah,
for sure.
And it's in the beginning of his. If you've seen Mean Man, his documentary that's available for
I have
free
not
on
seen it.
Amazon.
Is it good?
It's okay.
It's okay. Okay.
Yeah. If you're doing something else in the background, like if you want to like you're grading papers, it's perfect for
Uh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, So right from the cover, though, the cover's by John Kosh, and it was based on Gateways to Stalingrad, which was a cartoon that a guy named Daniel R. Fitzpatrick had done. And so I don't know what the original. I didn't look up Gateways to Stalingrad, but you've got on the cover Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, Heinrich Himmler, Charlie Manson, Jim Jones, Idi Amin, Pol Pot, Al Capone, the KKK, Jack Ruby shooting Oswald right on the front. And
Yeah.
originally, the original version of it had Ayatollah Khomeini, but they took him off because of controversy, and they replaced him with more
With
KKK
Klansmen.
members. Yeah, so there you go. But so I mean, besides Reagan and nuclear arsenal, the band's kind of addressing lots of political and social issues, and I think that
Well, it's I
that
mean
makes
I
it.
think it might even be like some kind of almost like throwback to, the Beatles cover of
Yeah, no, to Sergeant Pepper for
Sergeant
sure.
Pepper. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. I think you're right, and you know, I think you're going to hear a lot more Beatles. I would say this a lot more. How would I say this? Um, British invasion influence in the writing on Headless Children and Crimson Idol. It's definitely there. Whether it's the
Yeah.
Who, whether it's the Beatles, it just seems to be a little bit more of that. So yeah, but yeah, it's an interesting record, for sure. Um, but let's get into it. All right. So we've got this whole set's going to be devoted to the Headless Children. We start off with the Heretic, the Lost Child, and you get these kind of like ominous, dark, kind of industrial-ish vibes. It's definitely the heaviest song since the debut record, and Holmes and Lawless are fucking on fire, guitar wise here. And Holmes is really going to go out in style. If this is his last kind of traditional statement with W.A.S.P, he's doing awesome stuff. I mean, the main riff pattern kind of reminds me of Number of the Beast a little bit. It's got some of that to it.
There's a lot of Nawabum uh gallopy bits, I
Mhm.
should say to this. Like it's so weird. Like to think just thinking what was happening in 1989. This is totally not what was happening in 89, but now it just feels like so fresh compared
I
to
know.
all this other stuff we've been hearing lately.
And it feels, it almost sounds, and I'm not a big fan of this record, but it almost sounds more Maiden than No Prayer for the Dying was the year before. Like it
Yeah.
sounds more like vital and more like energetic than that record. And I don't hate that record. It's just not one of my favorites. So,
It's they could have put like an EP or a live album out that year instead of that record, I feel. But
yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. One of the things about the solos in this, though, they're kind of bright and they're kind of unique in terms of how the solo work is here. For as like dark as the song is, the solos kind of remind me of like the brightness that Lynch has on Burning Like a Flame. That's a
Mhm.
very specific comment, but that's like something I kind of heard when I was like, what does this remind me of? I'm like, it's fucking Dokken, but what era? I'm like, Burning Like a Flame, which is like upbeat. It's got like this major chord energy to it. I don't know. It's kind of weird,
I
weird
think
thing.
yeah, Dokken always had like a triumphantness to them as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
even if you're sad, you'll be all right. You'll make it through,
You're
or
burning like
whatever
a
it might
flame.
be.
Exactly.
And there's a little bit of that on this as well. I would agree.
Unless you get an STD, which is the kiss of death mark. So,
Yes.
yeah. But yeah, the apocalyptic energy, this propulsive rhythms that like Frankie Manali's doing with the drums throughout, and really that final 90 seconds of fucking the Heretic, like Holmes just tears it up. He's a madman. It's good shit. So, um,
Yeah. He's definitely goes out on a high note on this one.
yeah, yeah. Fun. It sucks because you'd think like maybe one of the reasons it was obviously a personality conflict and like substance abuse conflict. It sucks because sometimes you sever ties with like a band member when they're like I don't know they're like lacking. And it's like Holmes wasn't lacking. He was like an underrated guitar player of this era. He doesn't get talked about the way that some of these other guys do. So,
Yeah, I
um,
don't know if how bad his problem was in the the interpersonal like workings of the band, but
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
even like the
George and
next
Don wanted to
record was,
kill each other,
yeah, the next record was supposed to be, yeah, they weren't friends. That's
Yeah,
why talking to Dokken real quick, that new Dokken record, um, he's like, we've been playing together longer than the original band, and we're all friends. Like
yeah.
we were never
That's
friends in the original band, and it kind of
they were like
shows.
camps. Yeah, there was like
Yeah,
a camp, kind of two camps, almost like Kiss or something like that. Yep.
yeah.
Um, then boom, right into fucking this killer cover of The Real Me from Quadrophenia, which we kind of talked about. I think it's the best cover W.A.S.P ever did. They did a lot of them, as bonus tracks and things like
What, you don't
that.
like Mississippi Queen?
It's okay. Yeah,
It's fine.
Locomotive Breath, not my favorite.
That
But
Mississippi Queen, that's like a cover you pull out when everybody's been drinking. You're like, hey, I got a
yeah,
drum set in the other room and a guitar. Do you want to play a song? Like, okay,
it's
yeah.
it's so simple. Yeah, it's
They're not bringing anything to it.
no. Fucking Mountain. I do love Mountain, but
Yeah. Leslie West, man.
there's that scene in Adventureland, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but great. It's
I
a
saw
guy's
it once, but yeah.
super bad. Yeah. He's on a date with Kristen Stewart, and they're at this like local fucking club, and there's this like band up on stage playing Hot Blooded from Foreigner. And I just think of like that's got to be one of the songs that like bar bands cover the most along with Mississippi Queen. But the reason I
Freebird.
laugh is every time they show that, they cut in between like the band playing on stage and then like Jesse Eisenberg having like a pretty intense conversation with Kristen Stewart. And then they cut to like the lead singer who's this old guy and he's kind of headbanging. And it's during the solo. And he points at the guy playing the guitar and he goes, "This is my nephew." And it's like the fucking funniest fucking scene ever. And then it cuts right back away. Like that is exactly that band that would be like a bunch of dads playing with their fucking nephews doing fucking Mississippi Queen and Hot Blooded.
Yeah.
So um but Blackie's vocals, man, pretty fucking scintillating here. They're good.
Mhm.
He's
Yeah.
he's able to pull off the adultery kind of stuff, but like with a little bit more oomph to it. I would say.
Yes. Absolutely.
Then we get a great title track, "Headless Children." Real those dark themes continue, and that awesome intro that's really mood setting is kind of meets, dare I say, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son kind of keyboards meets Deep Purple with the stuff that Hensley's doing here. It's got some
Mhm.
somewhere in time that era of Maiden a little bit is kind of floating in this song. And lots of Eternal Idol, Headless Cross, fucking Sabbath on this song. This is where I
Yes.
hear it the
Yes.
most.
I
Um,
think that might be one of the reasons I love this album so much.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, we're both big Tony Martin guys, but you were the guy that kind of turned me on to Tony Martin kind of era
Well, just
Sabbath for sure.
I was surprised how every era of Sabbath was like, there's not anything bad. It's just different.
Yeah,
Like
that's a good way of
fuck,
describing
so
it.
good.
Different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not,
Um,
there's never going to be the Dio stuff again. There's never going to be, the 13 really wasn't that great.
it's not great. Yeah.
Ozzy did great stuff. Dio did great stuff. Ian Gillan did great stuff. Like it was super. I can't think of another band that had that many different singers and eras, and there's not really a turd in the bunch.
Yep. And speaking of that era too, I think the kind of style of Banale on this record
Yeah.
has a lot of Cozy Powell.
Yep.
It's got a lot of that kind
Absolutely.
of stuff. And this is also where I'm starting to
I think
hear, and
weren't they
again,
kind of contemporaries? They're about the same age.
hmm,
Because I think
well,
didn't Powell, he
came
died
from
pretty
Rainbow.
young.
Yeah, he got in a car accident. Oh no, that was when he got hurt. He didn't die from a car accident.
No, I think he
Yeah,
died
because
of cancer or something weird.
Quiet Riot was kind of mid 70s, really. You're
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so they probably, contemporaries, suppose. Yep.
Yeah. A couple, maybe 3-4 years difference, but
I also hear in the production on this record and a little bit in some of the music. And again, they draw from the Maiden pool, so this makes sense.
Mhm.
But I hear some Operation Mindcrime. There's little bits of these, not in the vocals, obviously. That's
yeah. How
but
dare
like,
you?
yeah, I know. I know Jeff Tate is a dirty word on this podcast, but musically, I think you're a person that knows that Queensryche have great music. You just don't care
Yeah,
about
I
the
like the
vocals
first
and stuff.
record. Yeah.
Yeah. but I think like it's more sleazy, you know, but like even
Yeah.
some of those early Queensryches have more Maiden and more kind of, tough metal kind of aspects to it. But definitely some of the production and just the epic scope of things, you can definitely hear. I mean, Crimson Idol has some mind crime aspects to it, right? So
Hmm.
like, I'm not,
I mean,
Blackie's
I
probably a
think,
fan,
yeah, I think any type of concept record, there's certain
Yep.
types of, tropes that kind of like bounce across all of those. But
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even Pink Floyd The Wall, you can hear some of that in Crimson Idol and different
yeah.
things too. But yeah, the ending minute of the song has everything working for it. It's great. Really a cool way to go out. And then speaking of Cozy Powell, there's definitely some Cozy Powell in Thunderhead. I hear a lot of
Ooh.
Devil and the Daughter.
Yeah.
That song from is that from Headless Cross? I can't remember if it's from Headless or Eternal
That is,
Idol,
yeah, it's
but
from Headless. Yeah.
epic doomy, kind of like a Lost in the Shadows, Queensryche, 22 Acacia Avenue riff that kicks in
Hmm.
at the 1 minute mark. That's pretty fucking cool.
Yes, I've
Again,
heard like it's prototypical Iron Maiden meets, Uriah Heep.
yeah, there you go.
I
Yeah.
love the whole the chorus bridge part, like the needles and pins, the dead men you're in. Like, I don't know, I think Blackie is very underrated as like as a vocalist and a songwriter
Yeah.
because he
Yep.
makes such catchy stuff. It's crazy.
Agreed. Yeah. And it's, kind of drug, heroin abuse, kind of their master of puppets thematically kind of
Yeah.
thing. Guitar wise, Mark, this for me, this song and what he's doing with like the sonic creativity of Holmes,
Hmm.
this is, I think, the best thing he did. This song, I don't know, like it's tough, but like there's something about what he's doing, like in terms of his ideas and his solos and the sonic quality. This is kind of like his thing, the lasting kind of pinnacle of what Chris Holmes could do in W.A.S.P. For
Well,
me at least.
it's perfect you say that because we haven't talked about this in a while. Great riff and that almost Greg McIntosh solo
Maybe that's what I'm
where
hearing. Maybe that's
he's
why I
on the
like it so
wah.
much.
It's very
Yeah,
emotive.
yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what tickled my fancy. So,
And there's
so
that
drink
little
up,
call and
Paradise
response
Lost
thing, like
people.
the devil voice.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yep. Boy, those Paradise Lost drinking game people are pretty pissed. They had to wait this long. So, but
I
here we
know.
are.
Well, I have one more probably coming up too, but
Oh, okay. All right, good. And then we get Rebel in the F.D.G, which is fucking decadent generation. That's what F.D.G stands
or
for. And
fucking Dead Generation.
oh, okay. All right.
That's what I
So
saw on Metal Archives.
did you? Okay. So I saw on Wikipedia said decadent. So who
Okay.
knows? But
Well, it's one of those things like MDC, like Millions of Dead
yes.
Cops or Multinational Court, like whatever it might mean.
Mhm. Again, it's kind of a dark side sequel to Wild Child in a weird way. Like
Absolutely,
this
yeah.
is the outcome of what happens to the Wild Child in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
lyrically and thematically. It's like Blackie reassessing kind of rock and roll's temptations, and it's a cautionary tale. And again,
Well, and he
a
says, "I'm
sneak.
a bad child, come and love me," in that as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
it's a sequel song. Like he's like being a wild child isn't all it's cracked up to be. Like you might get assassination attempts and like drug abuse and all these different things, and you're in the circus at this point. And
So here's the craziest takeaway I've got out of this whole episode.
all right.
Do you remember Howard Dean?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you remember when he destroyed his
The
political
yell.
career by going,
Yes, the yell.
"Yeah!"
Yeah, exactly.
So
If
when
only
when
political
Blackie
careers could
yells,
be
"Oh
destroyed by
yeah,"
things as simple as that today.
yes.
So
When
I
Blackie says,
wish.
"Oh yeah," that reminded me of Howard Dean's fateful scream
Oh shit, that's
from
funny.
back then. I was just like, "Oh my god," because
Oh
yeah,
man.
that's what killed his. Well, there's probably other things behind the scenes, but like that, they're like, "This guy's he's too affable. People like him. Like, what can we do to
He's
destroy him?" Like
he's
he
too good of a
screams like an
candidate.
idiot. Here we
Yep.
go.
Yep. There you go. So he's not part of the establishment.
Yeah.
So all right, so let's get into it. We've got the Heretic, the Lost Child, the Real Me, the Headless Children, Thunderhead, and Rebel in the F.D.G. That was Rebel and the F.D.G, Thunderhead, the Headless Children, the Real Me, and then we opened up with the Lost Child, the Heretic, all from the Headless Children. And we've got one more from the Headless Children, kind of a throwback a little to some of the. It's like a swan song for Holmes, but also like it's kind of interesting to like dip their toe into the old W.A.S.P kind of one last time about kind of a shit, shit kicker, the mean man, that kind of thing. And so
Mean motherfucking man.
mean motherfucking man, yeah.
I love this
Um,
song.
yeah, it's great.
It
This
talks
showed
about
up in
Chewbacca and Mad Dog
yes,
2020.
yeah, which they nicknamed Chris Holmes Chewbacca because of blonde hair and tall and all that shit.
Yeah.
But this did show up in the top 500 heavy metal songs of all time. It
Okay.
made it in at 474, so just cracked the code. Right after Madhouse from Anthrax,
Oh,
and right before a Pantera song I don't care about from an album I don't care about. But
cool.
this is what Blackie said about it. He says, Chris had come to me for years telling me, you got to write a song about me. You got to write a song about me. He originally had an idea for a song called Born to Raise Hell, and I thought it was okay, but I didn't really think it encapsulated him. So I waited until the right title again came along, because titles to me are very important. They're at least half the song. They set up the entire framework for what the song's going to be. So
I agree. That's
yeah, there.
some good insight from him.
Yeah. So it's it's got kind of a swanky Aerosmith ZZ Top kind of riff in it that I think is pretty cool. It's kind of fun.
Yeah,
So
I mean the chorus is like super fucking catchy and gets stuck in your head, and it's
yep.
just the lyrics are just dumb. It's just
Yeah,
it's
like I
dumb,
said,
stupid, and wonderful
it's
is what I
one
put.
last kind of nod to the old era before he fully goes away from all of that with Crimson Idol. So
Yeah.
and here we are. All right. Holmes and Johnny Rod are gone after this in 1989, and Blackie breaks up the band essentially in 1990, I believe, or late 1989. And then he resurfaces a year later as kind of a one-man W.A.S.P project, who's going to play bass, rhythm, and lead guitar as
It was
well as
supposed to be, I guess,
keyboards.
a solo project,
I think so.
and
Yeah, kind
the
of.
fans were kind of like, we don't care about that. And ultimately,
Yep.
when you hear it, it still sounds enough like a W.A.S.P album to be a W.A.S.P album.
Sure, but it's definitely his vision that he works on
Yeah.
quite a bit. He uses Frankie Banali and a guy named Stet Howland on drums, Bob Kulick on lead guitar, and then supposedly Doug
Brother of
Aldrich.
Bruce.
Yeah, brother of Bruce
Yes.
from Kiss. Did Bob play in any bands ever that you knew of? I
I thought I
didn't really
wrote
look
something
into it.
down here.
I didn't know if
Uh,
you being the Kiss guy, if you kind of knew a little about that or not. But
Bob
um,
Kulick. I'll look behind the
okay.
scenes here.
And then supposedly Doug Aldrich from Lion, speaking of the Transformers.
And Whitesnake. Yeah.
Oh, was really not
Yeah, he
Tommy
was in
Aldrich?
Whitesnake.
Doug Aldrich was? Oh no, shit!
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Supposedly he came in and played some leads. I'm not sure what songs he's playing leads on, but that's the running kind of
Arena
thing.
of Pleasure.
Oh, that's the one he plays. Okay,
Yeah.
cool, and that's one we'll definitely hear of. Um, the assistant engineer for this record,
Ross fucking Robinson, man.
Ross fucking Robinson, Mark. Um, who Blackie in the liner notes predicts he does a whole thank you list. And for Ross Robinson, he says, I predict he's going to go a long way.
Well, he did it.
He fucking did it, man. By the end
Yeah.
of the 90s, he's kind of ruling the second half of the decade. So pretty phenomenal. For those of you that are maybe old metalheads and don't know what we're talking about, Ross Robinson kind of got big with Korn's debut and kind of created the Korn sound of the second half of the 90s. The sort of new metal sound is
Yeah.
kind of his. Famously did Sepultura Roots, which I think is his
Mhm.
best production, I suppose, for whatever your critiques of him are. Whether you like or don't like that record, it sounds interesting, but yeah, Ross Robinson, that's
All
where he
right.
get his start as an assistant engineer on this record.
Get
So
ready for the Bob Kulick experience here.
oh fuck, here we
All
go.
right. Lou
Fuck.
Reed,
Okay, all right,
Kiss,
okay.
Meatloaf, Michael Bolton, Diana Ross, Wasp, Skull, the Tim Ripper Owens, Blackthorn. Do we have anything else of note? No, I don't know what Hookfoot is or
Uh,
Random Blues Band.
so he's just kind of like hired gun, but
He's a
like a
hired
good.
gun.
He's
Yeah.
somebody that you rely on, huh?
He's a studio
Interesting.
guy, I think, mostly.
Yes. Okay. Well, here's what Blackie had to say about Crimson Idol in the liner notes. And most of it's just him talking about how much fucking material they use to record it and stuff. So I'm not going to read
Yeah.
that kind of part. But he says, any artist who is lucky enough to have anyone take interest in what they create and have those people go on to support them thereafter is indeed truly fortunate. There is a part of me in Jonathan, and I felt the need to share both of us with all of you. The most honest proclamation any artist could ever make to an audience would be, quote, hold on to my heart, all I am, you hold in your hands. I am truly sincere when I say thank you to all of you everywhere. At the start of this record, I suspected that I was opening a real Pandora's box. How right I was. So I began a journal to document the recording sessions, the events, and the people involved in the making of the Crimson Idol. The following are excerpts from that journal. And so then he goes on his thank list and stuff. And one person he does thank that I want to point out besides Ross Robinson is Pete Townsend. For exercising a great demon in me, for the encouragement, inspiration, and conviction to pursue the Crimson Idol. He's my mentor. I hope I have done him proud. And I think that's kind of interesting. This shows up in Popoff's albums of all time. And let me find it. It's on page 286. And here's what Blackie had to say. He says, I built a studio, Fort Apache, and that took 8 months. Just to write this story took a year. The hard part about that was that when you do a traditional album, you record the music and then you decide the running order. With this, when the story was written, whatever the running order was going to be was written in stone. What I did was write this story and the subplots within it. And then I went back and looked at it and said, Chainsaw Charlie, what does that sound like to me? All the music was non-committal because you didn't know where it was going to go. I would always be worrying if the flow was any good. It's like building the Taj Mahal without a blueprint. It wasn't just making a regular record. This thing was huge. I don't know if I want to do another one like this for a while. 2 years of hard recording time, 22 miles of 2-inch recording tape, and about $10,000 worth of recording tape. I'm damn glad it's over. So it showed up in the top 500 heavy metal albums of all time at number 339, Mark,
Oh,
in between two really fantastic records. Metal Church's The Dark, which is their second one, and
okay.
Dokken, Back for the Attack.
All right.
So there you
Better
go.
than another Pantera album. So
Yes, from recovering. I don't know, whatever that fucking Pantera album is that I don't give a shit about. So,
most of them for me.
I know. This is the record that got me back into W.A.S.P, though. I will say that. Like I told you, around the time putting that history heavy metal countdown. So I never really knew the aspirations of this or Headless, and it really kind of unlocked some doors for me. And so I stumbled on this. This is pretty cool. It was through a Wikipedia click, and let me find it. I have it saved up here somewhere. Okay, so this is from the Metal Hammer, June 1991 article. And I'm just going to read a little bit from it because this is like right in the heat of the moment. And I'm trying to think. Chris Welch put this out. I don't know if he's still a metal writer or anything, but here's what it says at the beginning. It says, that heavy phase, redolent of the 60s, The Who, Tommy, and Pete Townsend is not the sort of thing one would expect from the band that made its name with gore, chainsaws, and naked women. But Crimson Idol, the name of the story Blackie has devised, will be the basis of both an album, a possible video, and a future stage show. Quote, the story is about a boy who suffers a horrible home life while growing up and runs away to become a huge rock star. The moral is be careful of what you wish for because it may come true. It's in some way autobiographical, but it is not just about me. It's about half a dozen people, some very close friends. I took elements of their experiences and rolled it into one. I'm not trying to play judge and jury here, but I depict things as I see them. Doing what rock stars do is 98% work. There is only 2% of it that's glamour, but that 2% is the myth that is perpetuated for the benefit of the public. What I am endeavoring to do is expose the fact that it's not just hard work, it's also adversity. Once you've climbed that mountain, if you're made of stone, or pardon the pun, rock, you'll stub your toes and bloody your knuckles before you reach the top. The rock opera genre hasn't been tackled for a long time, not since Tommy. Was that an inspiration for Crimson Idol? He says, well, it hasn't been done for 20 years, but the first thing I was listening to was Jesus Christ Superstar. Although I am a big Who fan, and I've got to give Pete Townsend credit for having the courage to fulfill it. After we did The Real Me on the last album, originally on the Who's Quadrophenia, I had correspondence with them. When they played Tommy in New York, I gave him a gold record for Headless after the show. We talked for quite a long time, and I told him I had this idea, but I thought it might be dated thing to do. He said, if you want to do it, just go for it. With Chris Holmes, his guitarist, having left, the next step was to start looking for musicians, and Blackie admits he couldn't get everyone he wanted. Bob Kulick played some guitar, Frankie Benali played drums, and the real Blackie played himself. Quote, the record is not just the pinnacle of my career. I would like to think that it's a statement of my life. It's an enormous project, and it was credited to Blackie, Lawless, and W.A.S.P. It's as close to a solo record as I can get. I don't want people to think I'm living on the past era or that I can't go on. Blackie had some mysterious things to say about those who will be first exposed to hearing the record. Hang on a second here. Whoops. Oh, sorry. The subject matter is important, and you should be forewarned that this could literally be the Pandora's box. I've often said that rock and roll is a great thing, and you can have great fun with it. But if you don't respect it, it will take. Hang on, I gotta scroll up. You take your life. We all know of countless cases where this has happened. It will be almost impossible for me to describe the story of Crimson Idol to you because of the complexity of the personality involved who have psychological problems. You often find that instability is a breeding ground for creativity. So, kind of interesting. What he has to say. I didn't know the thing about Pete Townsend until we kind of did some of this kind of research and stuff. So,
Yeah.
um,
I would
yeah.
say there's a
So
lot of Kiss Elder vibes to this album.
for sure.
I think there's a lot
Yep.
of like good intentions, and I don't know, the execution isn't all great, but there's some really nice high points in it.
It's interesting because a lot of it probably on the surface, seems like it should be cliche and that it shouldn't work. But I'll be honest, Mark, it all works for me. The
Okay.
only thing that doesn't work is the ballad, but it works as a story element, and I know why it's there. It's just a song I don't really like, but I like everything else except the heart "Hold On to My Heart" song.
Okay.
Um, I also listened to him narrate the whole story. There's like a bonus track. It's like 17 minutes of like Blackie telling the whole story. And it kind of like it got me a little bit. I was like, okay, I'm kind of like putting the pieces together. So I think it's if you're willing to put a little time into to understand some of the story a little bit, I think it has some pretty awesome kind of moments to it. So
Yeah.
I want to share a little bit of the story because inside this, he kind of writes some of it out. So I thought it would be interesting as this is the last thing we're kind of doing because there's a lot going on. So I'll share a little bit of the story, but says, I was born Jonathan Aaron Steele to the parents of William and Elizabeth Steele. I'm a Leo, born under the sign of the lion, and I was raised in a lower middle class family with only one brother, Michael, whom I loved dearly. He was 5 years my senior. My father's nickname was Red, which I could never understand why because his hair was sandy blonde. Nevertheless, the name stuck. So when my brother was born, my father became Big Red and my brother Little Red. I should have known from the first time when I realized their special connection that I just didn't fit into my father's plans. And as I grew older, the constant comparison between my brother and myself left little doubt who was the image of perfection in my father's eye. To him, my brother could do no wrong, and I became the invisible boy, the proverbial black sheep. And I soon figured out that red and black don't mix. The beatings I received became more and more frequent to the point where I would ask my father, am I the orphan son you would never need? But oddly enough, I worshiped the ground my father walked on. My brother and I were a strange mixture, as different as daylight and dark. Looking back, it's hard to imagine we came from the same parents. I sometimes wondered if we had the same father, but I always dismissed the idea as my mother was too far religious, my father as well, to ever think of such a thing. But my brother, who had always sensed my parents instilled insecurities, tried his best to encourage me. For I was born different, and he knew it. He often told me when I was born, an angel flew over my bed and christened me with a magic wand and said, you shall be the one. And I had no idea what the one was, but as I grew older, I began to understand. Most boys put their mother on a pedestal and worship them like the Virgin Mary, but with her, Two, my relationship was different and not for the good. She was opinionated, uneducated, sometimes prejudiced, overbearing, believed everything she read, true or not, and when it came to religion, was overzealous to say the least. A mind-boggling combination, but she was pretty, very pretty, and I would often wonder, bordering on complete confusion, how a person of this description could rationalize life. This was a series of characteristics that many times in my life I would look back on in bewilderment. And the women I sought after when I was older would be nothing like her. And the pain of youth, the misery of my neglect would manifest itself in many ways: depression, my enemy, fear, my friend, hatred, my lover, and anger, fuel for my fire. These four characteristics of my personality become the guiding force of my life and would control everything I did or was to become. I shall explain later in the story about them, which I call the four doors of doom. The mirror, the great plaything for man's vanity, the mirror was to become at times my altar of refuge, and other, my alter ego in its magnificent obsession with a relentless pursuit of attention. It served as a chilling reflection for my own wretchedness and my greatness. It was the one place I could go to see inside myself, to find love in an otherwise loveless household where I could be great, where I could be anything or anyone I wanted to be. 100% pure escapism until I discovered its precious secret. The mirror lives, it breathes, it talks, it lies. It has a personality all its own. It is as a genie that grants all the wishes you could ever dream, at least in my case, all except two. It was my 14th birthday, the day that changed my life forever. My brother Michael, the one person who was guiding light and my friend and my hero, was killed by a drunk driver in a head-on collision. He died instantly. I couldn't even bring myself to go to the funeral. My agony was so great, I couldn't come face to face with him that one last time. My failure to attend intensified my parents' resentment of me even more. But from that moment on, nothing seemed to matter, especially that living hell called home. For 1 year after his death, I roamed the streets in a fog, barely conscious of anything or anyone. I discovered alcohol, the girls, drugs, and in general, a life I had never known, which was exciting, frightening, and wonderfully dangerous. It was then that I staggered through a downtown city street in one of my drunken rages. I stumbled across a small music shop, and in the window stood the instrument, the fiery tool that would become the object of my newfound desire. The instrument of my passion, my obsession, the blood red six string. It was like I'd known the thing all my life. So, it's an interesting setup. Again, is it cliche? Sure, but I think he is able to thoughtfully. And again, I don't know. I have no idea what level of this is semi autobiographical. I doubt much of it is, and maybe little pieces here and there. But it's he's kind of laying it out. And so when you get to songs like The Invisible Boy and Arena of Pleasure, that we'll kind of start off with here, he's kind of getting into all that a little bit. And then Chainsaw Charlie is essentially the manager who discovers him and is just offering him the world and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of what this opening salvo of the first part of the record is kind of all about, I suppose, is the temptation of rock and roll and what depression and bad childhood, the sort of the dream of LA, the sort of Hollywood lost children and all the stuff that they kind of talk about on Headless Children, a little bit.
The brutal reality of the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some of that with Pink Floyd, The Wall, there's some of that with a lot of those kind of stories, I suppose, the sort of allure of fame and the dark side of fame and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting story for sure, but
because what Crimson Idol to me felt like if Paradise Lost did Icon before Draconian Times. If that makes any sense.
Wait, say that again. If Paradise Lost did
Icon before Draconian, or did after Draconian?
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I was
because I feel like Headless is musically very refined.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is just throwing a curveball, but also this isn't a full W.A.S.P record. This is Blackie doing exactly what he wants to do and having hired guns.
I also think too, and yeah, I've thought a lot about this. Teaching musicals in my film class is tough because some kids can't penetrate the idea and theatricality and artificiality of a musical or a theater performance, and even an opera, right? There has to be something more bombastic and kind of over the top about what you're doing.
Sure.
And that doesn't work for everyone. It frankly doesn't. The girl I dated last year, she lived and died for musicals and theater and stuff, and she loved that kind of artificiality and over the topness. And I can dig it sometimes, but I'm not always in the mood for it, right? Like, I
Yeah.
can't sit and just watch a bunch of, musicals and kind of fantasy sort of stuff. And this isn't fantasy, it's dark fantasy to some extent. But it's got that all opera has to be over. And I think musically there is a pomposity and an over the topness to some of the things. And it reminds me of a Blind Guardian record in the late 90s. It reminds me of like
Hmm.
Nightfall on Middle Earth or something, which doesn't work for everyone, right? Like there's some
Sure.
people might say like, oh man, all the little intros and outros and stuff. And, Queensryche does that in Operation Mindcrime and Pink Floyd The Wall. And I get why it's not for everyone, but for me, I think my sensibilities, especially being the big, Blind Guardian, and I like Operation Mindcrime. There's something about that appeals to me, but I also can see why somebody who loves the rawness of the debut couldn't maybe make this full, you know, the full connection to Crimson Idol. Like it makes complete sense, and I wouldn't fault anybody
Yeah.
for that.
Well, I
You know,
think even like I would be more like I would rather listen to an actual opera than a rock opera because if it's done in a different language, there's more for you to kind of interpret, I think.
yeah, I can see that. Yeah, yeah. This is like putting a lot of its cliches on. It's laying a lot of its cards on the table. He's not leaving a
Yeah.
lot of subtlety
Yeah.
to anything. And again, that could work for people. I get why that could be a criticism of this record. It works for me, but I also, like I said, 100% understand why somebody wouldn't be into it for that reason. You
Yeah.
know, um,
I mean that's the concept record, the rock opera, any of these things is a very there's very few of these that stand the test of time as like a relevant thing.
yeah.
Concept records are notoriously bloated. Um, and I'm trying to think what's like a great concept, universally praised concept record.
Um, I mean, minus the vocals, Mindcrime is like appreciated, I think, more than like
I don't
Pink
the
Floyd The
records,
WAP.
that's records fine. Yeah.
Pink Floyd's kind of bloated, like The Wall a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think but I think it's universally hailed. I think Tommy, I don't love Tommy, but I think Tommy and Quadrophenia are pretty respected in rock critic circles.
Yeah.
Um, boy, Nebraska from Bruce Springsteen. It's kind of a concept. That's like his starkest, darkest, like most like abysmal record, and it's pretty awesome for that reason. It's like Nick Drake, suicide folk or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I would say probably Pink Floyd or the Who. Those are like the go-to standards.
But there wasn't anything in hard rock.
Outside of Queensryche, not really.
Yeah.
That was what was kind of, I guess, revolutionary about Mindcrime. Maiden kind of was doing some concepty stuff with Seventh Son a little, right? Wasn't there a little thematic element to some of that record? I don't
Yeah,
know.
but it
It wasn't a
wasn't so much
story.
like a full story
It's not a
like some of
story.
these are. Yeah.
I mean, Sergeant Pepper. There you go.
Yeah.
But Sergeant Pepper isn't like a story with characters that are in every song either. This is characters in every song, and I
Yeah.
think
This is more
that's
traditional like Broadway play.
sure. Yeah, this is Jesus Christ Superstar and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's probably the most famous rock opera that actually was an opera. With Ian Gillian,
Yes.
in the performance. So, but cool. Well, let's talk about the songs that we're gonna hear after Mean Man here, just to sort of people this episode's already going kind of crazy, but it starts with the Titanic Overture, which sets up the story with some of Blackie's kind of most heartfelt vocals, I would say. It kind of
That's the
introduces,
operatic start as well, the
yeah, I
overture
think so.
and the beginning of
Yeah,
2001.
well, and any like kind of overture sets up like the theme. So you hear the main thematic riff that the album is going to use throughout multiple songs. And Rush's 2112 does this
Yes. Yep.
on a little bit. They show you a lot of like the sneak preview of a lot of the riffs you're going to hear later, and it takes you through the many moods. I think as an overture to an opera would, and when that Queensryche kind of maiden riff comes in and that gallop kind of begins, like in the swirling keyboards are kind of happening, I'm hooked. Like
Yeah.
I'm on board. Um, and then it kind of goes right into Invisible Boy, which has a lot of the Who vibes that Tommy and Quadrophenia have, with a little bit more of kind of the Maiden proggy kind of feel to it. Little Seventh Son and some of that kind of era. Um, I said, what's really interesting is this record is coming out as grunge, and Kurt Cobain is ascending as kind of like the last quote unquote true rock star that was a kind of universally hailed.
Yeah.
Um, and the
Until
album's
Chad Kroger happened.
well, until Nickelback, obviously, yeah. Um, and the album's themes kind of serve as like a weird cautionary tale for somebody who's going to go through some of those kind of same kind of motions. Now,
Yeah.
Kurt Cobain didn't he wasn't into like the girls and that side of fame, but definitely the drugs and the depression and some of that aspect is kind of there and that sort of idea. But it's definitely a cautionary tale, if you want to sort of read it as that. But lots of Blackie bombast that would influence, I think, the more dynamic versions of Hansi that we get with
Hmm.
with Demons and Wizards and late '90s kind of Blind Guardian and stuff. And great line, "I am the boy only the mirror sees." Like it's you can fool everyone else in your life, but you can't fool yourself, and
Yeah.
that's like, I think the ultimate kind of tale of this. And I think what I like about this record is it's an operatic tragedy, because as we kind of get into when we get to the last kind of tunes on this, The Great Misconceptions of Me, it's essentially a audio suicide note. You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't have a happy ending. This is it. Like, it's pretty grim. And so that's all kind of laid out in some of these songs here. Then Arita and Pleasure, Blackie's vocal dynamic really creates some pretty cool specific moods, like that. He's got like this anticipatory, nervous, breathy kind of energy at the start before he kind of kicks in with that, like, "Take me down, I'm coming home, the road runes inside the pleasure dome." And that's where I hear the most influence on Hansi, is
That's what
like
I wrote too. Yeah.
his transitions vocally are very much like, oh fuck, that's the kind of shit you hear on Nightfall on Middle Earth, like where Hansi changes moods so quickly, that tonal change.
Yeah.
Um, Solo's really emotive. Again, this is the one that Aldrich plays, so that makes a lot
Yep.
of sense. I didn't know that when I wrote that note. That yeah, very emotive solo there. And then at the end of the song, he meets Chainsaw Charlie, this kind of manager who's going to promise everything. And here's kind of what Blackie said about Chainsaw Charlie, the song. It's in the Pop Off book. Let me find it really quick
Murders in
here.
the New Morgue.
Murders in the New Morgue. Yeah, a little ode to Iron Maiden there, who they're stealing some ideas from. But let's see. He says, all right. He says, extremely angry at a record company president, someone who lied right to my face. And when it hit me that I was a product and not a person, it actually got easier to deal with people in the music world, because I realized hey, it's nothing personal. It's just a product. You're the new hula hoop. When you don't sell anymore, you get put in the bargain bin. So, I mean, again, nothing we don't know about the music industry. I mean, that's the thing about this, is like everything is cliche, but his heart's into it so much that I like kind of give him a pass. I'm like, you know what? Like, I like the music a lot. I love the ideas, and he's really going for it. So good for you. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
This was
it's kind
30
of
years
awesome.
ago.
Yeah. And the whole song is kind of this dialogue between Jonathan and Charlie, and he lowers his voice into a snarl whenever it's Charlie, and he sings in a higher register for Jonathan, and that's cool. I mean, I like that idea. Um, for me, this is like one of the two, I would say, musical compositional high points of the album. For me,
It's my favorite song on the album, I think.
I think this and the last tune, "Great Misconceptions," those are the two that really floor me in terms of like, this is why Blackie took a year to put all this together, to produce this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, there's like I have a lot of weird ideas about this thing, but the another I think similar vibe to Kiss Music from the Elder is that
Mhm.
we start with a fanfare that's the oath,
Yeah,
and then go into a overture that's the oath, to fanfare, little instrumental that gets going to, instead of Invisible Boy, just a boy.
yep.
Like they're doing very similar things. I would say that Blackie's probably more successful as a whole, concept record than Kiss Music from the Elder.
That's the
But
thing. I think they stick the landing with this. Like, again,
yeah,
I've listened. I think what would be interesting is on Spotify. Do yourself a favor sometime. Maybe when you get this on vinyl or whatever. But listen to Blackie read the whole story, the little excerpt I read from there,
yeah,
and it's you're like, okay, he believes in this, and like, it's sort of like forgetting Sarah Marshall when he wants to make the puppet Dracula kind of thing. It's like it may be kind of like a dumb idea, but when like your heart's completely in it and you just like really go for it, like I'm okay. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'll give you that. I think it's cool, and like I said, yeah, I think you're right. I think story wise, like he sticks to landing. I mean, say what you want about The Wall and Mindcrime, but those stories are fucking muddy. They're they're
Yeah.
they're not like clear cut narratives. I tried. I mean, I spent a lot of time with both those records in high school trying to decode them and try and figure out if there's like a clear cut narrative, and there is, but it's fucking murky. And to me, this is a straighter narrative because he keeps it simple. It's kind of cliche, but like because it's so simple, it tells a story easier. I think for audiences that want to get it, So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean that fucking the Maiden guitar work in Chainsaw Charlie, Benali. I think this is his best fucking work of his career. Is like in this song in particular.
There's some of the
Really,
anger in this is like reminds me of stuff from the X Factor from Maiden, the Blaze Bailey era.
yeah. There's a lot of X
Maiden stuff.
Factor on this. I think
Yeah.
even like Popoff mentioned that
Oh, did
there's
he?
some of that too. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, the middle section of the song is just fucking great, and
Yeah.
Joseph Schaefer, who has done a lot of stuff with us on the podcast. He's in the band Colony Drop and writer for Decibel. He said to give a shout out to Chainsaw Charlie when he heard we were doing this. So he's like, I fucking love that song. I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. So, all right, well, let's get into it. And then we're going to come back, talk about a couple, say our goodbyes, the last couple songs, and talk about patrons a little bit and do all that. So we've got Mean Man from the Headless Children. And then we've got the first four tunes that open up the Crimson Idol from 1992, the Titanic Overture, The Invisible Boy, Arena of Pleasure, and Chainsaw Charlie, Murders in the New Morgue.
nobody's son. My dad don't know where I stand. 'Cause when he looks at me, he don't like what he sees. He don't know what I am. poison snakes with double tongues, horny hedgehogs who do their wrong, deaf men and blind worms, they'll be not seen. They are pawns and rooks for a crimson king. They are a government with a parliament of whores. Can you hear the screams from the fame machine down in Chainsaw Charlie's morgue?
That was Chainsaw Charlie, Arena of Pleasure, The Invisible Boy, and the Titanic Overture from the Crimson Idol. And then we open things up with Mean Man from the Headless Children. So, as we kind of close things out, Mark, a couple new patrons I wanted to shout out Dan Galgano and Bubsy from Australia. That's what he's going by in his email.
Bubsy?
So, I reached out to him and said, like, thanks for signing up. Like, let me know if wants to call you something different, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
appreciate
Bubsy.
that. Bubsy, yeah. Maybe checked out our Australian Thrash episode and was like, yes, fuck yeah, I'm on.
Cool.
But yeah, so if you want to give us some feedback, shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com, or shout us out on Facebook, Jason and Mark. If you want to become a patron and donate to all this research and all the time and energy, and we put a lot of time and energy in this episode, pulling resources, books, all kinds of stuff
Well,
together.
we're at
Uh,
7 hours recording right now.
yeah, we're in crazy town here. So yeah.
That's not
Uh,
including listening and
yeah.
researching. That's just
Yeah.
recording.
So, if you want to go to patreon.com and look up a Requiem podcast, or it's patreon.com/Requiem podcast. You can kind of find us on there and make a donation. And I'm going to talk to Mark about, some ideas for some maybe quick episodes that we record over the next couple weeks, perhaps, maybe just focusing on an album so we don't have to devote so much time and we can just kind of go off the cuffs a little bit, because has been a while. We appreciate your patience. I know a lot of you don't care, but I also know that like it's nice to get something extra for the money that you do give us. And Mark and I have been trying to get ourselves like Mark's getting the kid mode, and I had to get done with school, and so we're trying to find some equilibrium. And I think I have extra time this summer, so I don't mind doing a little bit of that for patrons to sort of do some prep work. But we love getting people involved in stuff. We've even talked about doing some type of a patron auction. We've had some people that are interested in making some kind of donations for us to do a record or a band that maybe wouldn't be always on our radar, and maybe we'll do that for patrons as kind of a special thing, perhaps. And we've had a couple people that are interested in some stuff, so yeah,
Well,
we'll
and people
talk
that
off
are
mic about it.
interested in that want shirts, let us know like how many people, like just say, yeah, I'd be interested in a shirt.
We'll
And we
put
can,
together a Google survey. I know I said that
yeah,
last time, I think, but now I have time. Now that I'm home from Australia, I've got time during the day. I can just put something together and get like almost like a order form survey of kind of what kind of interest is out there. We know that some
yeah.
of the
Because if
guests
it's
on
like, yeah,
our
we've got like, 40 people that want medium and large shirts, then, we could
Sure.
easily put together an order. So,
Yep,
and we're not
absolutely.
gonna do like any of those print on demand things. We'll do actual screen printed shirts, original designs. So yeah, just let us know because that's something I've been thinking about in the back of my mind for quite a while.
I think it'd be a great idea. Absolutely. So, before we talk about the last couple songs and the end of the Crimson Idol and stuff, I did want to share. We didn't get a chance last time because I think you had to go. We were just running out of recording time because I think we had some technological issues that took a little bit.
Yeah.
These are just some comments and feedback that we've gotten in recent episodes. I like to read this feedback. It's cool to sort of always get. Nolan Bradley said, I started this from mid-May. He says, I started a new job last October, which has greatly impacted my podcast listening. So I finally been playing a lot of catch up since. Finally just finished The Deceased, and I can't believe I never gave them a listen before starting that episode. Those early 2000s albums especially are right in my wheelhouse. Not to mention I can listen to King share stories all day. He seems like a genuinely delightful guy. Going to be diving into Deceased more in the future. Here's one from Linus Hoagland, one of our patrons. He says, so finally, I'm listening to the Samael episode. Some amazing quotes from you guys, but I must say I disagree with Covenant Nexus Polaris. Haven't heard it in years, but gave it a spin the other week, and it really is a brilliant record that holds up way better than I thought. Animatronic, which I think is their second one, not so much. So yeah, I agree. I did actually pull a song out after we did that. I was like, this is like Enthroned Demu. I don't hate this, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He says, and they were forced to change their name due to the Swedish electronic black metal band Covenant, who are also really good. Yeah, if that's your kind of cup of tea. I don't know that. So kind of interesting. Jesse Levy This is a comment from that we didn't get to read. I think this is for the Samael. Yeah. He says, just finished the episode. One, cool that you mentioned the new Job for Cowboy album. If you get a chance, listen to it. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Yeah. I've heard it's better than I haven't listened to it yet. But two, this is my first time hearing Samael, and it was really cool. I think I like the stuff from Blood Ritual the best. I even like the stuff from Passage, though I agree with Mark that the program drum just detract from the overall sound. I think it would have been better if they did it with a sort of combination of both, like Ministry does. I like a lot of industrial music, so I've never minded the mashup of extreme metal and industrial. But yeah, for me, it was a bit of a mixed bag still with some of the stuff you played from Passage. Yeah, so it's kind of cool. I appreciate that. So
Yeah.
thank you, Jesse. Let's see, Andreas, for the when I posted something about the new Tony Martin Sabbath box set coming out, we got
Hmm.
some feedback from a few people, and Andreas, our first patron, says that's been me for the last week. I've already loved those records, but had not listened to them for 20 years. And then Wade Conrad, another one of our patrons from Indianapolis, he said this episode was a formal introduction to the Martin Sabbath for me back in 2019. I listened to it again last week, waiting for the box set, and it was a great education into the background of the musicians that made it. So, yeah, if you're not aware, we did a Tony Martin Black Sabbath episode several years ago, and kind of, I think at the time we had heard rumors that they were redoing Forbidden with new production and stuff like that, and it took them a
Yeah.
while, but
Yeah.
it finally came out, and it's a great piece, a great companion piece to the new Tony Martin,
I
thing. If
I
you want to
believe
get
it's
it,
sold out already too.
is it really? Oh, I'm glad I pre-ordered it. That's
Or at
cool.
least
So,
the LP version. I don't know what the press runs are, but just like seeing people, because I remember after before I got it, I looked up on YouTube to see, like some unboxing so I could see what I was getting.
oh, gotcha,
And
gotcha.
it had a lot more. I think it got a lot more traction than the record company putting it out thought it would.
Gotcha.
So
Huh.
I mean, of course, like everybody that had the stuff is going to get it again. Anybody that wanted it that couldn't afford, the prohibitive prices of the originals is going to get it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Hmm. Interesting. Um, this is about our last episode, the Danish Finnish thrash.
Mhm.
It's actually Joseph Schaefer. He says, "I had never given artillery a chance before the last episode. Needless to say, by inheritance is now on frequent repeat in my home.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear the episode until just after that artillery tour hit Seattle.
Just
I
like
would
you.
have been there with bells on. Yeah, here it gets even worse. To add to the irony." I'm sure that Colony Drop was offered the local support slot on the Seattle date, but I think we turned it down. What a mistake. Support Joseph
Oh
Schaefer.
man.
Yeah.
Ah, it
So
happens.
yeah.
It happens.
Yep. Um, and then let's see. This is Nils. I forget his last name, but he's one of our patrons. This is in the Mighty Raven Dark Warriors chat. He says, "I'm done with Samael and halfway through Denmark and Finland. Nothing to add, but keep up the good work. One request, and this is what got me thinking about maybe doing like one album or one or two album kind of patron shows. He says, "This is Cemetery, an evil shade of gray, or
Yeah, I love that
Satan's
record.
Court in the Act." So those are both singular, or one or two records.
Hmm.
The Cemetery would be cool to do that in Godless Beauty because I think Godless Beauty has a couple cool tunes on it, but mainly focus on Evil Shaded Gray could be kind of fun. So
Yeah, yeah. Especially like in a production standpoint, I really love
yeah.
how that sounds.
Yep. And then one last one. This is from patron Jason. I think it's Andraki. It just says their first name and I screenshot it, so I apologize. But he says, I really dug Samael and have been listening to them since that episode. They are a band I missed out on prior, so I appreciate the exposure. I haven't listened to the new one yet, but I'm excited to find other new to me bands that I overlooked. If you're looking for some comments about W.A.S.P in advance, I have some thoughts. I think I first became aware of W.A.S.P thanks to ads in Kerrang, which my older brother would pick up as an import at our local record store. It was an ad for Animal Fuck Like a Beast, which I think had the U and the C starred out in Blackie's Buzzsaw codpiece. I was 9 years old, and I definitely didn't know the word fuck like a beast or a normal human or otherwise. Um, let's see.
We were the same
But I
age when
knew
that came
enough.
out. Then, yeah.
Yeah, but I knew enough to be scandalized by this new band. While my brother is certainly responsible for exposing me to, quote, the devil's music, he was protective in a ham fisted way and sheltered me from stuff like that. I'll tell you when you're older was a typical refrain for when I asked why I couldn't hear certain songs or see the back of the Stack Attack album by Wrathchild. I don't know what the back of that is. I
By
assume you didn't.
Wrathchild America.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Says, even though he was protective of me, I think once he got his hands on Animal, it was so good he had to allow me to hear it too. I had already seen pictures of Blackie and Randy Piper looking like Mad Max and was equally scared and intrigued. At that point, we had Kill 'Em All plus classics from Priest and Maiden and had heard Merciful Fate and a little bit of Venom. In my head, I built up W.A.S.P to sound more like bands like Merciful Fate and a little bit of Venom. In Metallica. So I'll read that sentence again. In my head, I built up W.A.S.P to sound more like bands like Merciful Fate and Metallica that were more than a little scary for 9-year-old me. I was shocked by the lyrics, especially because I heard the first line, I got pieces of naked ladies, not pictures. So he thought it was pieces.
I got pieces of naked ladies.
Holy shit, you're carving up.
Yeah.
He was shocked by how downright catchy Animal turned out to be, especially the chorus. It was pretty jarring, to be honest. They looked so evil. They were singing about tell you when you're older material, but that song was almost as catchy as some of my mom's old Beatles records. I was hooked, but I was definitely I was confused, but I was definitely hooked, is what he says. So that's pretty funny.
Good place to be.
Yeah. Let me see if there's anything else that people posted since I posted that. I don't know if there's anything else. No, I think that's it. Joseph had one last thing. He says, I forgot. I also love the Samael episode. They're a band I never really messed with, but Ceremony of Opposites is now a heavy rotation in my house. I'm a bit of an industrial fan, so I knew their newer material, but even as a goth boy, I find their excursions in that realm a bit milquetoast. Ceremony is different. It's the black metal heartwork. I didn't know that I need it. I feel as though they created the template that Satyricon now follows. It's bizarre to me that some young band hasn't tried to chart a career paying tribute to that album in particular and carrying it forward. I wonder if maybe Samael will come back to it. It's interesting. Yeah.
They do play their older stuff together, but
they do. Yeah. But I don't know. Can you hear the connection between Samael and kind of some of the sharper kind of industrial vibes of like Satyricon a little bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah. The same wheelhouse.
Along with Thorns. You kind of add Thorns in there a little bit too. So, yeah. But all right. So as we kind of wrap everything up on this record, I will say that the final arc for the story of Crimson Idol is kind of like a steam engine with the Gypsy meets the boy, Dr. Rockstar, which sounds like Dr. Roxo from Metal Apocalypse. So I'm just going to assume that he's like a cocaine clown that's like tempting,
like Pennywise,
Jonathan. Yeah, he's like giving Jonathan drugs and cocaine to fuck his life up. And I am the one. They're a pretty solid trio. We're not playing them. But the story kind of continues, and we end with the idol and the great misconceptions of me. And I wrote, In Between is the only song I don't really like on Crimson, which is Hold On to My Heart. But I also get why it's there narratively and thematically. It's important to the story. It's just not it's one I skip usually,
Didn't Phil Collins do like You'll Be in My Heart? For the Tarzan movie?
I'm no Phil. Oh, maybe. I'm no Phil Collins expert, Mark. Okay. So I'm not sure on that one. But The Idol, on the other hand, this song, holy shit. This is the album Blind Guardian borrowed from the most with regard to epic song construction and using harsh vocals melodically. And when Blackie sings, "Where is the love to shelter me?" for the first time, I'm kind of legitimately moved. It's like an emotional fucking moment, This whole cliched rock star gone dark shouldn't work, but Blackie poured his heart and soul into this and saw this in the LA scene for years. So it kind of works in a way. I said when it goes into the aching midpoint solo out to him singing "Kiss Away the Pain and Leave Me Lonely," that's some fucking epic shit. It's good. And that's
I think the chorus and the solo are both solid.
Oh man, yeah, and this is where I said like all musical theater has an air of pomposity and a fantastical kind of hyper realism to it that, like I said, doesn't work for everyone. It's like I wrote, not everyone loved the Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical. I did, but I could see why some people it just didn't work for them. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of stepped too far for some people, but this is kind of the emotive, cathartic, fucking shredding at the end of the song closes the song, and really, really fucking good. And this song actually managed to make it also into the pop-off stuff. Let me find the page. So this was a semi-hit, I guess, from it. It's The Idol, and it sits in between Walk All Over You from AC/DC at 468. This is 469 in the top 500, and The Cradle Will Rock from Van Halen. So there you go. Interesting. But Blackie says, well, the idol is pretty much the pinnacle of the record, where he wakes up, he looks around, and then he says, is this all there is? This is everything I've worked for? I'm still not happy. Is this all it's ever going to be? It's kind of like when a person is on the road or traveling down the road where they meet themselves and they're not sure what they say when they finally become acquainted with themselves. So kind of a cool little way there.
Crossroads, bro. Hanging out with the devil.
Crossroads, baby. Yep, the blues, devil's music. Here we are. And then we end with probably for me, alongside Chainsaw Charlie, my favorite song. And Great Misconceptions of Me is the final song on the record. Kind of has like that Sergeant Pepper kind of intro, outro kind of thing where they're saying goodbye, to the whole album and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the musical suicide note to his friends and family. I don't want to be the crimson idol of a million eyes. And I just said, Kurt Cobain kind of felt this idea of being the idol that everyone rallied around and just kind of not everybody can handle fame. Hendrix couldn't handle fame. He kind of hid himself in drugs, and Joplin and some of these kind of characters too, and when that fucking Maiden Wasted Years, like early Queensrÿche guitar kicks in,
yeah,
that's some good shit. Really cool lyrics in this. I'll share just a couple because I think they're pretty awesome. But like, I am the prisoner of the paradise I dreamed, the idol to a million lonely faces. Look at me behind the mask of sorrow, 4 doors of doom behind my eyes. I've got their footprints all across my crimson mind. There is no love to shelter me, only love. Love set me free. Living in the limelight, little did I know I was dying in the shadows, and the mirror was my soul. I think, it's cliche, but it's like good cliche, I guess.
Well,
if that
cliches
makes sense.
for a reason too.
Yeah, I mean,
like stereotypes are for a reason because they're generally true.
it fucking works for me, man.
Yeah.
People might be like, oh, they're kind of sappy or overwrought. Well, guess what? It's fucking opera. It's supposed to be overwrought.
Well, heavy metal's over the top already.
Yeah, it's supposed to be over. So that long live part, long live. I mean, that's fucking Blind Guardian, Nightfall, metal opera type shit, And then when Blackie rips into that "Be careful what you wish for" scream 4 minutes in, that's fucking Hansi, dude. It's like, like all that. So
well, I think this shows that mature heavy metal can be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Emotive screams, but melodically controlled. Frankie he's tapping into his Keith Moon, I Can See for Miles kind of style drumming in this song, especially in that caustic kind of midsection that's really kind of chaotic, but in all the best ways. And that last 2.5 minutes is a journey. That's what makes this maybe like alongside Chainsaw Charlie, maybe my favorite song. It's kind of depends on what mood I'm in. Because when that riff fucking comes back in for that final gallop, Love Set Me Free, man. A rock and roll tragedy. It's good shit. So this has been a journey. I'm glad we did this, Mark. I'm glad we waited 6 or 7 years so we had the time and the energy to do this properly. And I hope that for people that are kind of W.A.S.P naysayers, maybe one of these eras you really dig, and hopefully you at least dig the history, because I think they're a band with a really interesting history. And
in retrospect, they're very. I think they kind of inhabit a key, kind of a critical role in heavy metal that's not really talked about a hell of a lot. So
yep, and that's what we're here to do is unearth the hidden stuff. So again, if you want to sign up to become a Patreon, we do appreciate that. If you want to give us some feedback, we would appreciate if people could go on our new feed that we put up last, it's been a while, but almost a year ago, on Apple Music, and leave a comment, because our old comments are with the old feed. And so we haven't found a way to merge those. So, or at least a 5-star review or whatever you feel we're worth, just to sort of get us a little bit more attention. This is one that we might be able to share in the mainstream a little bit more, because it's a band that's a little bit more mainstream for us, I would say. So maybe we'll get some new people checking this out. And if you made it this far in the episode, congratulations. You just got the Requiem treatment. So hopefully you're drunk or you're in the middle of a road trip at this point. So, we do appreciate you kind of
tell a friend,
share the podcast. That's what I mean. So
say you want to, like you got a 40-plus-year-old friend who likes heavy metal and has lots of time on their hands.
Yeah, they want to
love this show.
Work on fucking engines in their garage. Just let us.
They're a long haul trucker. Like, let them know.
who doesn't want to hear the demo version of Animal Fuck Like a Beast? I mean, like, I'm just saying, it's
And then
there.
35 minutes of commentary
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
We're like,
all
yeah,
right,
the
Mark.
college that you never thought you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. But all right, I got to run. I got a horrendous two mold show to get to, so we'll talk soon about some Patreon stuff. But it's been real, so we appreciate all of you kind of tuning in for this. So we're gonna close out with the Idol and the Great Misconceptions of Me from the W.A.S.P Crimson Idol record from 1992. So for Requiem Metal Podcast, I am Jason.
And I'm Art.
Baby, this stuff is great.
It's better than great. You do enough of this stuff and you can be able to
Jonathan, I'd like you to meet a friend of mine, Tanya.
Jonathan, what the bloody hell's going on here?
Well, if it isn't the world-renowned Alex Rodman, the best manager money can buy.
You've got all the friends money can buy. You know damn well you're supposed to be in the studio tomorrow, and here you sit with these fucking leeches all around you. And if you don't stop this fucking debauchery, I'm leaving you. You got it? This little party is officially over. Get out! Everybody get out!
Jonathan,
Yeah?
it's showtime.
Oh